Hi, this is Cesar Orcesares, the arts home-based coach for American River College.
And I'm Shane Lipscomb, home-based coach for manufacturing, construction, and transportation.
And welcome to our pilot episode of Connect ARC, a home-based podcast.
So, Cesar, it's been a year.
It has been. It's been a whole year.
More than a year.
More than a year. You're right. Since the pandemic hit, since ARC went remote. How's that been, man? How's that been for you? What's it been like?
Crazy.
Yeah. It's been rough, man.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to have a work life balance. Like there is no balance. There's just work, and then I'm in my life continuously.
Pretty much.
In my home.
Yeah, pretty much. It's one thing to spend all day at work in front of a computer and then come home and spend all evening in front of a computer. But when it's the same computer all day long, it just doesn't work
at all.
No.
Well, it's also like at work, at least we get to like walk around, there's a campus. We can talk to people, we can actually see people in person and check each other's body language or whatever and actually have a conversation. Well, through video, it's like you get my head bobble. That's it. You get my head bobble and maybe some shoulder shrugs, and that's all you get. It's different completely.
So when we went out, if I recall correctly, we were given like 3 days notice, right? Essentially, it was, hey, it's Friday,
like 3 days.
Right? It's like, hey, it's Friday. By next Wednesday, no one can be on campus.
Right.
So pack up what you need, grab something to work on from home, and we'll talk online.
Right. And it felt like it was like the next day. It was like, hey, grab some stuff. You're going to be at home. And I'm like, wait, okay, what exactly do I need? Like what do I need to be at? I don't know. And foolish me, I thought this was gonna be like the best situation. I was like, I get to work from home. I get to wake up and just kind of start my day. No commute. Turn on the computer. I'm here. It's great in my like sweats and got a professional top on. Let's go. No, I didn't think I would want to be on campus and strongly want that separation. But I also will say that there's a difference between working from home and what we're doing, right? We're not just simply working from home. We're quarantining at home and not really having the outlet to go and kind of find that separation elsewhere, right? Or convene with a bunch of different people. So it's a different situation from working from home.
Sure. Yeah. When we went out, I actually was temporarily reassigned to operations. And so I was still on campus for a little bit after everybody left, and it was very surreal to be walking around the campus while it was so empty. But by the time I actually wound up being reassigned at home, I was very optimistic. I was like, oh, May, we'll get through graduation, and then everything's gonna be fine. This quarantining for a couple of weeks is going to have the effect that we want it to. And then it's going to be back to business as usual. So I was a little bit like you. I was like, well, this is going to be a nice change of pace. And I'll enjoy it. And I did for 2 or 3 weeks, and then it started to seep in. And when you're sitting there trying to relax, you're watching TV, you look across the living room, you see your work set up, right? You never quite get a chance to leave work, and that's tough.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this, my work setup is in my bedroom. So I literally and my desktop is next to my bed. So I literally, when my alarm goes off, I roll over, I click the button, I get up and start my day, and start the motion. So it's a really weird, especially, so this, I'm going through my master's program right now. And so from work, right, from this same spot, I'm just changing what I'm doing to my master's program work. And so there's really no continuous separation at all.
I mean, yeah, what do? You just like get up and walk to the refrigerator, and then that's like your change of scenery?
I mean, that's pretty much it, right? It's like, lunch hit, let me go for a walk for like 30 minutes to actually get some sun on my body. and then eat and then back to work, and then same thing with dinner. It's like let me go for a walk after work and then get dinner. I'm trying to see if that helps with that, like, that commute, right? A pretend commute. But I've never been a morning person. I don't know if I can't do those walks in the mornings, but kudos to those who can.
And I imagine there's some people out there who actually go through the trouble of getting dressed. I mean, I go through the trouble of getting dressed, but people who go through the trouble of getting dressed and getting in their car and like driving around the block. Actually, come to think of it, not endorsing any particular projects here on the podcast or any
No, of
particular
course
products
not.
here on the podcast, but trip down to Starbucks, before
In the
starting your
morning?
workday. Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, I mean, we have a Starbucks on campus, and that was really nice in the morning, especially when I was
For sure.
working in the Center for Leadership and Development. There's the Starbucks literally right next door, so it was a constant reminder. It's like, well, I can get some coffee right now in the morning, which was really nice ritual to like start the day. Although I did see my my wallet start to get a little bit light there, especially with the regular coffee trips. You know what I'm saying?
For
So
sure. Yeah, it doesn't help when there's a Starbucks, 15 feet away from where you're working.
And you smell the coffee when it's
Mhm.
brewing, man. You're like, come
Yeah.
on now, that's just not fair.
But speaking of the job that you had on campus,
Mm.
so listeners may not know this, but neither Caesar nor I this time last year were home-based coaches. And in fact, at that time, there was no home base other than sort of on documentation and paperwork as people were planning to bring this into fruition, into existence. A lot of those plans, of course, were assuming we were all going to be on campus, right?
Yeah,
And so a lot of the work
completely.
that was being put into this was assuming we're going to have a physical space in order to provide these services. And surprise, we're all working from home.
Yeah.
And this is the point in the story where everybody says, okay, let's just put this on hold.
Mm.
Wait till we get through this one issue instead of trying to add fuel to the fire. Right. Or we already have this incredible heavy lift of trying to figure out how to support students in a completely online environment where those students aren't necessarily experienced with that. The faculty certainly aren't experienced with that. The infrastructure isn't set up to do it. And we've got 3 days to figure it out. So on top of that, you would think that they would just do what they had to do to get through. And instead, they said, this program is the future of ARC, and it is designed to help students, and students are in more need now than they have ever been. And so they made the decision to move forward.
How is that beginning startup for you, man? How is the inaugural kickoff?
It was terrifying, if I'm going to be
totally,
honest.
totally terrifying. Yeah, I know.
Because we hadn't done anything like this before, and so we had no idea what to expect. And
especially during pandemic, I mean, online when everything that was written out prior was supposed to be for on ground, right? We have some idea of what on ground may look like, what we can do on ground, but we had no precedence for trying to pull this off, right?
Yeah. So grand opening comes along, and I remember sitting in the Zoom channel ahead of the president's speech, right, and the kickoff of the grand opening, and watching the waiting room, and watching 2 students, right, or 2 participants, 5 participants, 12 participants, right, 100 participants, and just feeling the tension rising. Right. It's like, oh my God, this is real, and it's starting, and people are here. People
Showed up.
Yes,
and
they did.
I don't know if there's been such a show of participants for something like this. And we had maxed out, and people couldn't get in, which was wild. I mean, kudos to the college who supported it, who wanted to be there. We thank you for that completely. and who've been supportive since our kind of our start to the home bases.
You know, we have to acknowledge the huge asset that was the Achieve coaches,
Yes.
who had spent the previous year providing that first year experience to our brand new students, and gave us a lot of support and a lot of advice and ideas on how we could pull this off. And so pull it off we did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think you know, to give some kudos also to the administration and noticing that, you know, students are gonna need services more than ever virtually, right? And us being able to provide those services. I mean, like, what has it been like to do this job and help students for you?
It has been incredible. Incredibly difficult at times,
Oh yeah.
but also incredibly rewarding. Um, you know, one of the most rewarding parts about working at American River College in any position is that opportunity to see a student succeed, right?
Hmm.
To be a part of a student resolving a roadblock
Hmm.
that's in the way of them achieving their goals. And so much of those opportunities were ancillary to the work that we did, and now it's front and center, right? It's our
Exactly.
focus, and it's what we do all day long.
Mhm.
And so that's incredibly rewarding. I love doing that. Honestly, the only thing I would want more is for more students to be coming forward, right? um you know, that's been one of the difficulties of starting
Online.
this, starting
Mhm.
this online, is getting the word out, getting everybody to understand um the variety of things that we can help with, and to get people in the habit of sending students to us. um and so, you know, we're working through that. It's getting better, right? We have some new systems in place that are sort of automating that process for us. We're getting the word out to
Yep.
faculty are using us more and more.
Yep.
And so, you know, I won't say that I'm at a point where I have too many students.
Not yet. Not yet.
No, but I do appreciate the volume of students that's coming in, and the opportunity I have to be a positive influence in their academic career. You know, not just their academic career, right? But we're having an impact on their lives a lot of times.
Mhm.
Getting students set up with you know, food, housing vouchers, medical
Mhm.
and mental health, you know, if they need it, as well as, you know, your sometimes just providing them with certain services relieves a little bit of stress on their part,
Yep.
which makes the rest of their world go a little bit easier,
Yeah,
right?
and they're returning. You know, those same students are returning for
Hmm.
help, which I think is great because I think it shows, oh, that we're reliable. They can rely on us to help them and continue to help them with whatever they need in regards to their academic life or their personal life, right? Or find the services that can get them that help.
So we have, right, we have the college trying to figure out how to do the work that it does completely online, completely remotely.
Yep.
And then on top of that, we have the college implementing this whole new restructuring of how students are served,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if that isn't enough, right? The college is in the middle of a search for a new president, right?
Yeah.
With Dr. Thomas Green um, planning on retiring in the summer,
Yep.
and agreeing to stay on and help with the transition in the search for a president through December. And we are very thankful for
Super
him
thankful.
doing that.
Yeah.
Um, but there was a search for a new president,
Mhm.
and I would like to say it was a very successful search.
Yes, I would like to
Yeah.
say so as well.
So let me just take an opportunity actually to read her bio for
Mm.
anybody out there who actually hasn't had an opportunity to meet Melanie or learn about her. So
Mm.
here we go. Melanie Dixon became the 8th president of American River College on January 1st, 2021. Melanie has served the students of Los Rios colleges for 6 years, since moving to Sacramento in 2014 to become the Dean of Student Services at Folsom Lake College. Melanie quickly demonstrated her skill and commitment to students, and within 3 years was promoted to FLC's Vice President of Student Services. Over the subsequent years, Melanie has served in a variety of different capacities in the district, leading student success efforts at the district and college level as Los Rios's Interim Vice President of Innovation and Success, Sacramento City College's Interim Vice President of Student Services, and most recently, as Los Rios's Associate Vice Chancellor of Educational Services and Student Success. She has led efforts at the Los Rios colleges to improve services for students, to bring instructional and non-instructional faculty and staff together in support of new and innovative ideas, and to ensure that the student voice is always at the forefront of all decision making.
And meeting Melanie, talking with Melanie, I think that her approach for the student voice is completely true. She has at the forefront of her mind. She has, I think, the well-being of faculty classified as well at the forefront of her mind. And I'm looking forward to the future as our president and what she has in store for the transitions.
So it's one thing for the two of us to sit here and sing Melanie's praises. Of which there are many, and of which it is all heartfelt. But maybe it might be better for people to get an opportunity to hear from Melanie directly.
Yeah.
So we were fortunate enough a few days ago to sit down and have a casual conversation with President Melanie Dixon.
Melanie, thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited to have you and doing this interview with us. I'm going to introduce the first question here for you.
Excellent.
It's going to be becoming a college president during normal times, right? Must be challenging in itself already. So how does the pandemic complicate that transition?
Absolutely. A great question. And first and foremost, thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be with you all. And you're quite right. Presidencies under any circumstances is quite a challenge, right? Getting your arms around a college, understanding the culture, the direction, the interests, the needs is challenging in of itself. In the remote environment, I'll tell you the greatest challenge is I'm a highly relational person. And it's very difficult in the Zoom environment to develop that relationship with individuals, right? That's much more than surface, right? So we can do the niceties and check in, and certainly have had a great opportunity to do that with ARC family, and folks have been wonderful. But to know people a little bit more intimately, to be able to develop a sense of trust, a sense of shared connection has been somewhat challenging in this environment. So my saving grace is that I was here in the district and at various colleges within the district prior to now. And so I've had relationships prior to coming. But I would say that that is the biggest Achilles heel for me. And then also understanding the college's knowledge about the direction that we're going, right? Does everybody in the college understand where it is that we are and where we're headed to? And if not, how do we ensure that that happens so we don't leave folks behind? Folks feel like they're a part of the process and understand their role within it. So those have been great challenges, but some that I welcome, right? Comes along with the territory, and we're wading our way through it and really just trying to communicate as much as I can through video, through written print, keeping lights and more personable experiences in the Zoom environment to kind of build those relationships as much as I can. So thanks for the question.
Sure. So you have this extensive history with Los Rios, as you pointed out. You've been with us a while, and you've had an opportunity to observe American River College from afar, and now you've joined us as our president. Have there been any surprises in the transition, good or bad?
I think both. When you're looking at a college from the periphery, I think one of the things that I will say about ARC is anybody looking at it from the periphery within the district really admires the size. I think the power that ARC has as it relates to the size, the age and the history, right? And I think there's a lot more forward thinking that has happened here just because of those things. Right? We've been in the community longer. We have much more entrenched relationships with our K-12s and our community partners. And then, of course, the rich history that we have of faculty and staff that are here, right? Many of the individuals that I learned that are working here have had families work here, they've gone to school here. You know, there's a long line of exposure with ARC and their particular families. And so for me, that was something that was nice to learn, but something that I hadn't known before, right? And so I've learned that coming in, and I think that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing to have the historical knowledge, and then I think it's also a good thing to have individuals that are willing to kind of think about the world with maybe a clear set of glasses, if you will. And I think that's the benefit that I've had, is that I come in and I don't see the world necessarily how you've seen it historically, but I can appreciate it, and I can use that insight and knowledge and expertise to inform the direction that we're heading together. So that part has been quite interesting. And just the passion that people have, right? Many of our donors that give to our college have a great affinity for ARC and have been touched by this college in some form or fashion, again, as an employee or as a student, or in many respects as both. And so that to me really gave me a sense of what the culture is, right? That what we believe we can do, right? We got this title called the flagship, and we wear that as a badge of honor. What would be bad to that, or maybe the alternative of that insight that I've seen positively, is that I think sometimes we can give ourselves labels and pat ourselves on the back without necessarily critiquing our work the way that we need to. And so for me, although I believe ARC has proven that we are a flagship institution in many respects, there's still a lot of work to do because our environment is ever changing. And so what I hope, and what I've started to experience, which isn't bad, it's actually exciting, is that folks are willing to dig in. Folks are ready to engage in action. There's been a lot of planning, a lot of talking about the plans, a lot of discussing whether it's the right direction. And I think folks just want to see now the work be actualized, right? That those efforts weren't failed missions, if you will. And we're starting to see that. And that to me is really exciting. And, you know, and I know we'll talk about some of those incredible things today, but very exciting for me to see that. So a mixed bag for sure. But I think I'm at the right place at the right time with the right people. And that's really exciting to me.
That's beautiful. I love that. I think, especially in this pandemic time, there's a sense of reflection that's happening, a sense of taking stock, right? Looking back and also looking forward to see what we have and what we can do with it, right? Which actually leads into this next question. Being remote has given us an opportunity to identify areas where we might streamline services, right? For now or for when we're returning to campus. So what has changed since our remote operations began that is unlikely for us to go back to when we are on campus?
Absolutely. So I think that ARC has done a lot of work in the Guided Pathways efforts to build programs and initiatives. And I think one of the change that's occurring is we're starting to give ourselves permission to let go of the things that we've been carrying for years, right? We built this new thing. This new thing is going to help us accomplish X, whether it's student success, closing opportunity gaps, or helping our students, employees see themselves as a part of the fabric of the college. But to do that and to be able to sustain and fund, right, these new ideas, these innovative ideas, you have to let go of some of the things that you've done. And I think that folks are prepared to do that. So that is definitely a change in community college in general, but certainly at ARC, right? That once you build things, you kind of build them and they're there in perpetuity. And there's a shift and an acknowledgement now that those things have not worked for all people, and it requires a certain evaluation and examination, and then a correcting or editing of our practices and approach. And I think we've done that. So I think you'll see more of that, right, as we go through the pandemic, because the world is changing around us and the demand will change. And naturally, we will have to adapt to that particular space. So there's that. I think the innovation was on full bore as you guys were doing Guided Pathways and ATD. And I think that the reorganization process around your governance structure, those things are big changes. And they're heavy work in their political work. We think about the equity work happening here, very hard conversations, for some people, very uncomfortable conversations, very passionate conversations. I think that those things will continue, and we will continue to build on some of the foundation that's already been put into place, right? And I think about the equity plan at the college, the governance structure that's been put in place to be a little more nimble. So I think those things will continue to be refined and evolve over time. what has changed, I think, for the most part, that will be here to stay is that I don't think that there's ever going to be an environment where on-ground operations is what it was prior to the pandemic. One, we've learned in many respects that there are things that we can do online that actually create a better experience for the employee and the student. Right? So when we think about online forms, right? When we think about simplifying the triplicate forms that we used to use, those are like refreshing for everybody. And it has a great impact because when people are processing triplicate forms, there's many hands that have to touch that form. When you do things electronically, there's an expeditious nature to it. There's a accuracy nature to it. And I think it allows people to build capacity in their areas where they've been bogged down by all of these manual processes that really are time consuming. And as you know, create tensions between offices where things are moving slow and those offices or areas where things need to move much faster to bring people on board or to attend a professional development opportunity, whatever that thing is. So I think that's a refinement that is here to stay. In student services in particular, we found that there are services that we can provide to students that actually students much rather prefer online. So an example of that would be when you look at things like financial aid, right? The processes by which we have students go through to onboard them. So they do the application, they go through our admissions and records process, if in fact they have transcripts, or if in fact they have residency questions, things of that nature. And then you have this financial aid piece where we're packaging students so they can understand that I can afford to be here and what can I afford to actually do while I'm here? How can I get my books? Those things have actually been more refined in this online environment. And I think students prefer to not have to run back to our campus 3 to 4 times to resolve a financial aid matter when I can do it all online, right? And so I think that those things that we've changed that increase the student experience, reduce the workload issues that we have in really critical areas, high traffic areas, again, admissions records, financial aid, and we can name others, but those are the primary. Those things will not change. And so what has come from that is this discussion around the scary boogeyman word, centralization, right? And most of us at the college hear centralization and we're panicked. What does it mean? We lose control. How do we make sure our students are getting what they need? How do we communicate to the college what's happening? But it depends on how you look at it. And so we keep using the financial aid example. We're going through a conversation about what centralization would look like because of these benefits that we've found in this remote environment that students have benefited from and the office itself has benefited from, whether it be alignment in language, because we know now students are picking up courses at multiple colleges within our district, right? Now I'm running through different processes. The alignment of that makes it much more simplistic for me. And then we don't lose that student through an inadvertent crack that we didn't know existed. So the way that, these things will evolve is yet to be defined, but you can expect that there'll be some back end of financial aid that's really around taking in and doing data input of student financials, their parents' financials, developing an award, really the input and what I would call transactional portion of the process, right? And then there's something that we hold dear, which is the relational part, right? That how does a student ask questions? How does the student understand what other resources live outside of the Pell and the BOG or Promise Grant that it's now evolved into? And being able to have somebody that I can connect to point me in those directions and understand my unique needs. So I think financial aid will be one of these areas where you have this transactional piece that allows us to get capacity, allows us to prioritize how we award students in a way that's equitable, right? That our low-income students are able to get the funding so they can purchase their books and be prepared when the semester starts versus later on and be impacted from a success perspective. But then there's this piece that we'll have to retain, which is really the relational piece that helps support our colleges, support our instructional faculty that need to connect students, and certainly connect students and their families in particular as they come to our college campuses. So that would be a change that the impetus was as the relation of the pandemic. But the benefits, right, are for everybody and will long stand the pandemic. So I think many experiences like that or processes like that are here to stay. This footprint in the remote and on ground is here to stay. Whether we want it or not, that will be the demand of the people. And therefore, we will respond to the demand of the people because that's what we do. We address the needs of the community. Yes. So, and then I think there's this ability to, in my personal and selfish way, some of the things that will change is how we onboard people, right? So not only our students, but how do you onboard classified folks? How do you onboard our faculty? How do we share similar values? And I think the online environment in these 50,000 million gazillion Zoom sessions we go in that we get exhausted from, what we've learned is it's also a benefit. There are opportunities to leverage this Zoom space, even when you return to the ground, right? To be able to bring people into the dialogue and be able to engage in topics that sometimes you need to make really rapid decisions on. And so I think there are great opportunities that Zoom has provided, even though exhaustion has been the primary at this particular point. Those would be some of the things.
Got it.
So you mentioned Pathways and a lot of changes that have been going on since we've gone remote. Pathways led to the Homebase initiative, which had been in planning for a while, but we actually launched during the middle of the pandemic. Where do you see Homebase fitting in amongst ARC's several ongoing support initiatives?
Well, let me first say the fact that you've launched it in the middle of a pandemic really highlights our flagship identity, right? That who's doing that in our system? That's super crazy.
That's right.
Most individuals elected to push pause on those things, right? And wait till the next year to roll them out because they were dealing with all of the other decision-making that had to happen as it related to social unrest, the pandemic, and just how do you go to the remote space and make sure that folks are prepared. So for me, I think you ask a really phenomenal and foundational question. And it goes back to a point that I made earlier about giving ourselves the permission to let go of things that we've always done, and we just keep doing them because we have always done them. We've now built, right? I mean, think of Homebases, right? When you think of the Pathways work and what Homebases does, which is really brings a world down to a manageable size for students. It focuses their energy, it focuses their support, and it really increases their probability of not only persisting, but completing and transferring, if that's so their desire, or certainly entering the workforce and able to provide a better life for themselves. So whatever that journey is, it really creates a roadmap and a menu. So our faculty have done a phenomenal job in building the maps and really helping us kind of visualize what that would look like and what a student truly needs. And so that work has been taking place for a long time, as you know. And then you couple that with really this service model that really talks about, in my mind, the dream, right? Which is a one-stop shop. Then when I'm a student, I can go someplace and I can get everything that I need there. I don't have to bounce around the college campus and try to figure out from 5 different people how that happens. And not only can it happen on the ground, but we've now proven that we can do it in the virtual environment. So a student is in a pathway, then they only want to be online. We have the ability to meet that student's needs. So to answer your question, one of the things that we're going to do over the rest of this semester is engage in some college-wide engagements, discussions, right? Around, here we are, we're heading into this post-pandemic life if we're lucky. It's what it looks like. And who is ARC now, right? What are the things that we've done and what do we need to refine or edit that no longer has relevance, right, in this new environment? Or what are those things that didn't feel like they had relevance and now we need to elevate a little bit, right? So I'll give you an example. Homebases, in my mind, is not another support initiative, right? We don't need one more initiative. What we need is an identity, and we need to be able to brand it and be able to bring students to it. And everybody needs to understand it in a clear way where that referral process is smooth and our talking points to our community partners and our K through 12s is smooth. So when I think about Homebases, we're going all in on it. And when I mean all in, what I'm saying is it's not an initiative. It is ARC's model. It is the model by how we situate ourselves as a college. And it's not a model that's going to be actualized over the course of the year, right? So you did a phenomenal job of implementing it in the remote environment. But now what does that look like when it needs to be remote and on ground? What does that need to look like when it now starts pushing up on things that have traditionally been handled in other areas? Because once you create a one-stop shop, you've now called into question the relevance or the need of some of these things that we've traditionally drawn on. And so those will be some really rich discussions that we'll have to have. What are the implications? And then how do we resolve those implications in order to really support this model and everybody get in line with it, but more importantly, understand their role in it, right? So I can be a faculty member that is within a STEM home base. What's my role as a faculty member there? Is it just that I keep teaching my course that's in science? Or is my role to teach that course, but also communicate and connect and vibe out with the faculty that are also teaching within the STEM home base to understand the intersectionality, or what I would call the interdisciplinary nature of our curriculum, right? So we're really focusing on the experience, and then our faculty are able to lean on one another to share and exchange ideas, whether that's about what I've done to serve students from a DI population that's been successful within the framing of science or engineering or math or any of our technical programs. So I think that's really the richness of this, but it requires some conversation, because it means we got to stop doing some things the way that we've done them. And so these college-wide engagements will look at support services delivery. Here's what we know to be true, and this is what we know. What are the other things that we need to know? What are considerations, ideas, concerns that folks have as we move out of the pandemic? Same thing, instructional service delivery. What are the pedagogical, andragogical practices that need to be maybe considered as we think about having this space of now a online and on-ground experience that's much more robust in the online environment, which has not been our history, right? ARC was a leader in that, and that kind of changed. And then these online colleges came about, right? And so how do we continue that thirst for meeting the needs of those individuals that truly want to be online? And right now it's not either or, it's both and. So it's a different way of thinking about some of the things that we've created in an innovative fashion. And then the other parts that we'll talk about is our student equity and achievement plan. So we've had this plan for many years. It's taken different iterations, but the problem is that the plan was funding things that didn't necessarily drive the metrics within the plan. And so that's cute, but not necessarily how we're going to guarantee that we continue to get the money. So the executive team, and I just feel very privileged to work with the VPs and the deans that I work with, because what we've been able to do is go line by line and say, you know what, this line item right here, it's a great activity. It doesn't belong with this funding source. And then that allows us to go all in and fund the things we need to do as it relates to our guided pathways and equity work, i.e. home bases. So you guys have pulled together home bases a little bit on a shoestring as it relates to staffing, right? You have all of these different home bases, and you don't have all the bodies to support them in a high touch way. And so we had to address the finances in order to be able to provide the resources to bring the staffing to truly go in on a model. So a part of the shift is that, one, it's not an initiative. Home bases is our model. And that because of that, we need to look at our resources and our human capacity, and we need to situate ourselves accordingly that that model is successful and benefits not only our students, but our employees that work really, really hard when we understaff or underfund programs and services. So the dream here is that home bases now take center stage. Everybody understands what home bases is designed to do, which is really expedite a student's pathway to completion, but through a focused manner, a very high touch and holistic manner. And then now there's integration that comes between instruction and student services that has typically been siloed. So we begin to bring our world together, and now we're thinking and grappling about issues more holistically, right? Not just through one lens, but through the whole experience of a student. So it's super exciting to me from a model perspective, from a persistence and completion perspective, and from a clarity and simplicity perspective, right, for everybody involved. So my answer to you is not another support initiative. It is our model. It will stand the test of time. And it means that there are changes that we need to make. And so one of those changes is conversations happening now around the Achieve program, another phenomenal program that was an innovation out of Guided Pathways that has done a great work touching students, right? When we think about in the remote environment, when we're in the pandemic, over 3,000 students touched by that particular program. Pretty phenomenal. And those are first-time students. So, I mean, I think it speaks to a small but mighty team that really had a vision and a dream to actualize. But then that comes in conflict with your home bases, right? So now we got to pick some stuff and we got to tweak some things to make it make sense. So the team now is looking at Achieve and figuring out, what does Achieve truly need to become if in fact home bases is where we're hanging our hat? We don't want to confuse our faculty and our staff. We definitely don't want to confuse our students and our K-12 partners. So that's the work that happens when you get innovation. It means that you have to look at where's my dollars been going, and how do I adjust those to make sure that this innovation is actualized and, more importantly, sustained. So Home Bases is here to stay. We're going to fund it. We've done a lot of research to be able to do that. We'll be doing hiring of specialists to be able to actualize that high touch outreach piece.
Awesome.
And then we'll be talking about it at Convocation next year and helping others understand where do they fit within the home-based structure, and then allow them to weigh in, right? What are concerns that I have? What are things that feel a little clunky to me? And we will continue the refinement process of that particular program. And it's really, really exciting.
That
really
sounds
exciting.
amazing. That sounds
Yeah,
so awesome.
sorry to be so long-winded. You can tell I'm excited about it.
I'm excited as well. I'm happy to get all that information, honestly, because some of it's I know, and some of it I'm excited to hear the plans for the future and how that's going to look for all of us. So it's good to see your enthusiasm. Obviously, me and Shane are a little bit biased on home base, but I did want to touch also that something you've already touched on a little bit, which is the unrest, the equity piece, the uncomfortability conversations that we may have around equity, right?
Yeah.
And also going towards how home base being the center, right? The new center and the new model of ARC, and also giving your extensive background and advocating and helping disadvantaged communities. What are some ways that you foresee home base can work to improve the lives of our most underserved students?
Absolutely. So I think the model in of itself does it. Right? You create clarity for me, some simplicity for me, a network for me. I mean, that's what students want, right? Whether it's DI populations or not, but DI populations need that. I don't have time to meander. I don't have time to run around campus and figure out who the contact is. And quite frankly, I don't have the patience to do that, right? I have a lot of things that I'm trying to contend with. And if it's that difficult, you've already planted the seed that maybe this isn't something I can do. Right? So I think the model in of itself removes so many barriers for all students, but specifically our DI pops. So I want to lead with that, right? Because that doesn't necessarily feel equity specific, but the design in of itself embedded equity within it, right? And creating that simplicity and that network of people. So that's the first part that I would share. The equity work, one of the things that drew me to ARC was some of the equity work that you all are doing. So, you know, Pam Chow, Jen LaFlamme, Nick Daly, many of those members are kind of leading the charge of figuring out how do we think about it from a practitioner perspective? Because really that's where equity work lives, right? Is it's how do you think about your own biases, your own privileges, your own advantages, and how you bring that into spaces to either lift people or minimize people's experiences. And so I'm very proud about that work. We got a lot more work to do in that area, right? And I think it will be slow work because it's scary. It's scary when you talk about things so high stake as somebody's identity and potentially say the wrong thing, right? Call somebody maybe a he when that's not how they identify. Maybe assume just because somebody identifies or looks at surface value as an African-American, maybe they don't identify that way. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they look very pale, but they do identify that way, right? So I think people get very fearful of, what if I make a mistake, right? What are the implications to me as a faculty member that, right, is supposed to have the answers and be the expert in the space most of the time? What does that mean if I stumble and make an error as it relates to that? And then I think the other part of it is it challenges us, right? It challenges our own value systems, and that's really uncomfortable, right? When my mother raised me, everything that she raised me to be, I thought was amazing, right? And then I come out into the world and realize, oh, that was amazing in my household, but not when I'm engaging with this community, right? They don't think that's that amazing. So I think it's about seeing people. I think it's about valuing people's experiences. And if we can look at it less through, you know, it's just race, because race is an element as it relates to the work that we have to do, no doubt, no question. But if we think about it from a success perspective, it leads us to the same place, right? And guess what? All faculty understand what student success is, right? They may not agree with the definition of it, but they understand what it is and they understand what success outcomes are. So for some individuals, it's about how do you frame the conversation of equity in ways that feel accessible to them? Not letting folks off the hook from doing the real work, but helping them feel comfortable coming to the table and grappling with the difficult conversation, because it's rooted in my training, it's rooted in my expertise, and I'm comfortable in that space, right? But once you lay a label on it, now I get a little uncomfortable with that. So I think a part of our work is creating that space to have conversations. And for somebody like me, an African-American woman, I can get really passionate about the work that's happening with, the Black community or any DI community that I think has a similar experience of oppression and marginalization, right?
Most definitely, yes.
But me being passionate and browbeating individuals around them adopting my perspective doesn't bring them into the fold. It doesn't create an inclusive environment. What it does is it means that I have to do more of the work that I've always done by myself, right? So we gotta figure out a way to express the needs, the hurt, the traumas that exist as it relates to experiences, but also create the space for folks that may not come from that background to be able to inquire, ask questions that might be slightly offensive, slightly inappropriate, and then also not discount their contributions. Because just because I don't come from a community doesn't mean that I may not have some really good solutions for how we support a community. So I think there's that, right? That coming together in community to resolve the larger problems for our internal experience, but also our students' experience. And then the other part to it is we just got to do it. We got to lean in. We got to deal with the discomfort. It's okay to be uncomfortable in an educational environment. If you're not uncomfortable here, then where are you going to be uncomfortable at, right? This is supposed to challenge you. It's supposed to open up people's worldview. It's supposed to lead, you're supposed to leave this institution changed. And so that means that these conversations are really important for us to grapple with, and we shouldn't shy away from them. Our growth is at stake when we shy away from them, but more importantly, our community and our students' growth is at stake. And so we just can't risk that. So we got to lean in and be bold and courageous and thoughtful and have grace for one another in this work. The last piece I'll say to this, and I know I've been very long-winded, so please feel free to edit me wherever you need to. But a part of our journey in the SEEP plan was also how can we confirm and be transparent to our college community and to our students that the money that we receive to address those issues in particularly are actually going there, right? Yes. So we can't just go and apply for dollars and then go put the money where we want it to go. It has to go towards the things that we say we're committed to. And what we said is students first, and that we believe in equity and social justice. We believe in an exceptional teaching and learning environment. We believe in a working and learning environment where people can be happy, thrive, and be innovative and creative, right? Those are the things that we said are important to us. And so going through this budget aligns us with what we espouse. Right? You can't just talk about it, you got to be about it. So we say amazing things. Now it's how do we do the work to align our actions with that? And your money, as you know, always tells you where your values are. So you can say whatever you want to. And usually what they say in my community is a funky pair of lips can say anything, right? What happens is what you do. And so these resources are being reallocated to the things that this plan is designed to do, but more importantly, what we say we stand for and what we believe. And so you'll see things like cultural centers being developed, right? You'll see those cultural centers being developed and aligned, right? In ways that are going to be uncomfortable to those individuals in those programs that have been working autonomously and slightly in isolation or in silos, right? Because how do you build a program and create the opportunity to be able to scale it when you have growth if you don't have the resources? If everybody needs the same thing, but they just need it to be a different color, right? Then now your resources are spread thin. And then when I give you that thing, what are you doing with it? You can't scale because I don't have any money to support scaling because I've now created 4 instances of the same thing. So what we have to do is start understanding that in 21st century, people aren't one thing. There are multiple dimensions of individuals' identity, and our obligation as an educational institution is to touch all of those things, right? Socially, we need to touch all of those things. Academically, we need to touch all of those things. From a wellness perspective, we need to touch all of those things. And that's about those communities coming together, being able to contract when it's a culturally specific issue, i.e. our Native community and sovereignty, very different when you think about that community versus the African-American community that isn't dealing with sovereignty, right? They're dealing with racial issues. So we need to address those sovereignty issues and how are we going to value that and highlight that value in our community, but also acknowledge that our Native students, our Indigenous students also in this world will need to be served by individuals that don't look like them. That don't come from where they come from. And we do our students a disservice if we prepare them for a world where they only think they're going to interact with their own. That's just not the world that we live in. So a part of this is bringing folks together and understanding how we truly come together in community, but also validate identity and create a sense of belonging based on cultural and racial and sexual orientation and any other, right? Religious or any other identity. So that's a part of it. How home bases comes into all that, to bring this and land this plane for you all, is that you now have this academic structure. And coupled with that, you now have this cultural and identity structure. These things now become integrated. So let me give you an example. Home bases are all over our campus based on a packaging of majors that allows a student to explore and then kind of narrow that focus in as they go towards their second year and then transfer or career, right? The cultural identity lives in that space regardless, right? So the model that you've created identifies simplicity, a clear pathway, and touch points and milestones for a student to move through that are highly relational, which we know DI students need. Any student needs it, DI students in particular. Then you couple that with now being able to relate to the cultural centers and our learning communities, right? That now create the structure that is fully related to identity. So if I am an individual that the only reason that I see value of myself in college, I don't really know the academic side. Somebody just told me to register here, but I do understand my cultural side. That now becomes the ability for us to pull students over to the academic side. So what I see is a sharing back and forth, right? That the home bases could bring in individuals, whether it's students or employees from the cultural centers or learning communities, to create opportunities for their students within home bases, and vice versa, right? That home bases now gets to go into these cultural centers and talk about the menu of options for students that they can potentially explore. And then again, have this sense of a holistic network. So I think it becomes integrated, and that's the work that we're doing. Integration. Don't work over here and do all these amazing things. Bring that amazingness together. And so I think that's what home bases are going to do, is they're going to really bring DI Pops into a very clear academic identity that's going to be supported by this cultural or sexual orientation identity, right? It's going to be exciting, going to take time, but it'll be exciting.
We're going to be returning to campus here, hopefully sooner than later. Some on-ground instruction might start as early as this summer with labs in some of our difficult to convert or impossible to convert classes. I wanted to ask what impact you see that having on students, some of which have never been on a college campus before, our incoming freshmen from last year.
Yes. Oh, so let me just say a couple of things before I dive in. And again, edit me wherever you need to.
Thank you, Melanie.
I think the first part of that we have to acknowledge, and I think it would be short-sighted for us not to acknowledge, is that we've always been on the ground, right? Not everybody, but we've always been on the ground. Our first responder programs have never left the ground. Our facilities folks never left the ground. Our IT folks never left the ground. So many of us are still on the ground doing our day-to-day work, and some of that is instruction, right? And so I think that's important to acknowledge, because I think not acknowledging that isn't fair to those individuals that really took the risk, set out a proposal to implement our protocols and allow us to test them in a really real way to keep our community safe. So I want to highlight that. I can't tell you, though, I'm more excited about the fact that majority of us are going to be trying to transition down, and we'll have this sense of community and this vibrancy and this chatter and this buzz on college campus. So right now, as you mentioned, impossible to convert classes are coming down. So those are obviously those that we couldn't run online, whether it be a science lab that just wasn't conducive, or some ESL scenarios, right? Where we create those opportunities for individuals that I can't get on technology and go through that class because I'm not even at that level yet to understand what that technology is. So there's all these different conversations about kind of what needs to be here for DI populations from a success perspective, but also just to have a footprint to show that we're actually kind of transitioning back. I think people need that from a hope perspective, right? That when is this going to be over? I want to start seeing the indicators. So I think there's a couple of things that I would point out. At Convocation, when I started at ARC in this remote environment, so I can certainly relate to those students that are freshmen that are just coming in this environment. One of the things that we had as a theme was hope, healing, and handling business, right? That we needed a little hope in our environment, that we needed to create opportunities to heal, and that we ultimately can't stop serving students, right? So all of those things are true. I think the same theme is necessary for students, right? When our students come back, they're going to bring a heavy amount of experience and trauma with them, right? Many of them have been environments where there is a multi-generational family, right? And they're all trying to access the same Wi-Fi. They're all trying to utilize the same space to conduct these meetings and kind of maintain some level of professionalism or accountability or whatever it is, the environment, right? High stress, high stress. We also know that mental health issues have exploded because of the sense of isolation and the lack of relational touch, and that students are going to come dying for that. Because if you think about majority of our students being kind of the traditional age or the 18 to 24, and then of course our secondary category, we have a little bit more of that than most of our sister colleges, some older students. But the isolation is still the same. So if I'm an older student and I have children, I've been stuck at home teaching my kid. I've had to become a teacher, and I haven't had adult interaction or intellectual interaction in the way that I may have been used to if I was a student. And for those students that are just coming in, they haven't had the chance to have a college experience. They've gone through their whole high school career likely thinking like, I'm finally going to make it to college. I've graduated. And for our DI populations, it's historically true that for most of it, and I'll speak in I terms, my mom only expected me to graduate high school. Graduate high school and don't get pregnant before you do it. And if you've done that, we've accomplished all the goals in life, right? So if you think about those kind of mindsets that come out of low income poverty households, right? Because we're in survival mode, we're not necessarily in planning and visioning mode. Those are heavy things that you bring back with you, and a lot of skills that students will need that they didn't get as a part of the exposure to home bases on the ground or support services that we have on campus. So I think what we need to acknowledge for those particular students that were here is that there's some hurt, there's some trauma, there's some confusion, and there's going to be disconnects in their knowledge about how this works, right? Mm-hmm. How you gather or access things in the online environment is going to be very different than how you do that on the ground. Now, we're doing the work to simplify that from what it was before, but it still will be a little bit more work. I got to walk to different places and I have to have some level of understanding. So I think our goal is to figure out how even those students that started with us in a remote environment that were freshmen, how do we bring them into our culture and help them understand in a very intentional way of what ARC is about, what ARC can do for them, and what's available at ARC. Right? Not this reactive mode that I'm assuming that they've experienced as they've come into our institution and been pushed kind of and thrust into the online environment. I think we also get to offer them is choice now, right? That you may still have that online environment if that was an experience that you really, really liked. Our goal will then be figuring out, what does student engagement look like in a robust way in an online environment? What does a club look like in an online environment, whether it's related to an instructional area or whether it's related to activities area. And that's the work that we'll have to do. So there's some investment in time and energy that we'll need to do there to create some experience. We'll have to do a lot of outreach to our students that are already within our system that's had this experience within the remote environment as it relates to the pandemic. Help them understand what it should look like when we're not in a pandemic and we're not being reactive, right? And what their expectations of us should be, and more importantly, their expectations of themselves as a college student at American River College. So I think there's that. Trauma, healing, training, opportunities for students. Mental health counseling has to be much more robust as they come in and transition. And much of this I would also say for employees. So I'll just put that in there, but you couched it in students. And then I think there's a robust activity. So they can see that ARC has a pulse, right? We're not just this thing out there on the World Wide Web, that we're really a place, and we're a place of connection and belonging and value. And so that's what we're going to have to embed to our students. So there's going to be an orientation piece that's going to need to be robust. There's going to be a massive communication campaign that's going to need to be there. And then ways for us to engage students in the online environment in which we haven't ever before at this degree, right, at this scale. So I hope that answered your question.
For sure. Thank you.
Yes, most definitely. And I think speaking to those difficulties, speaking to those challenges, right, that we've all gone through, and in particular students, right, who are going to be on ground and, like Shane had said already, have never experienced college, going into possibly their second year as a college student, right? So I'm curious if you have any advice as we wrap up here, what you can say to students or share with students that are struggling to continue their education.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because the struggles are different from student to student, right? And some are much more easier to overcome and talk about and provide strategies for, and some aren't, And so I think about a student that I worked with about 2 weeks ago. And this student has been raised by their grandparents, a young mother, and lost her grandparent during COVID. And that was her lifeline. That was her connection. And that was her community. That was how she raised her child and got her child to and from so she could work. And so the whole net, right, has been pulled out from under that particular student. And yet there's an expectation that you keep going, right? And so I think we have to be human. And I think we have to acknowledge that what we may want for students may not be where they are right now. But what we need to do is create pathways for them to actually get on that pathway when they can. And so that means follow up. That means checking in with students that may not be able to return right away, but that we want to keep touching base, let them know we're here, let them know we want them here, and the pathway to get here. And that requires high touch, right? Which is why we got to do the hiring around coaches and mentors and the student design team that we're developing so we can get our hands on the pulse here and develop a strategy to be able to do that. So there's that piece. My advice to a student in her situation is that it's a journey, right? It's not a race. So the desire would be to get you out in 2 years. And the reason is to minimize your cost and be able to leverage those dollars at a 4-year, because we know that for students to truly change their economic standing, the large majority of them will have to get a bachelor's at a minimum, right? You know, and CTE students, there are certainly great gainful employment opportunities in that particular regard. But for majority of students that are transferring, you're going to have to get a bachelor's. And so we know that they need those resources there. We don't want them to come here traumatized, trying to fumble their way through, and then potentially finding themselves on probation 2, dismissed. And now they diminished all of their chances. And that heel is much now a much more, I was going to say slope, right? I was getting ready to talk math on you, and that's why I stumbled, because I don't talk math, right? Math people need to bring me along. But the hill is much harder to climb, right? The gradient is much more steep for a student that now finds themselves in dismissal. And we know through trends that by the time a student finds themselves there, their return, it's a very small percentage of students bounce back from that, at least at our institution. They may go somewhere else, but here, that's where they are. So I think for us, we have to understand a student's individual experience and advise them accordingly, right? That it's okay to take one class if that's where you are right now. It's okay to take 6 units if that's where you are right now, and then show them the pathway that when you feel like you have more capacity, if you complete that semester and you got an A in both of those classes, you can pick up another class. Let's talk about what that third class looks like, right? Be able to help them take it in chunks where it feels manageable, that they can have some level of confidence and some level of success, right? Which is our goal for students. So there's that piece. I think for our students that are kind of deciding, should I even complete college, or can I afford college? I think it's our obligation to tell them what it is that they can afford, right? Based on the resources that we provide. So being very clear on that in the front end, especially for those students that may have stopped out and don't know that we have HEERF dollars that are able to provide greater support, right? That there's a lot of money in the system to provide relief around technologies, textbooks, and tuition and transportation at the point by which we transition down. So we need to tell students that on the front end. They can't come in and have to find it. And so we got to be more proactive in what it is that's available to help a student be successful in their journey, whether it's 6 units, 12 units, or 15 units, right? We're going to create a structure and opt-out scheduling where we're going to try to lock folks into a full-time schedule, but they can opt out of that. That's not their lived experience. We lock them into a full-time schedule, which gives us an opportunity to talk to them. Does this work for you? Here's what this would mean for you as it relates to your time investment in studying and connecting and collaborating with your peers. Is that something you think you can do? Okay, you think you can't do that? Let's scale back then. Maybe you want to opt out and we scale back. And this one semester, we focus on this number of units and then scale up. So I think it's about ratcheting up the stakes for students versus dropping them into the deep part of the pool, especially given their experience in the pandemic. So my advice to students would be ask questions, right? Ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. That's the old adage, right? We always tell students that. And then I would say, ask the question again if the answer isn't right? And ask it of another person if you need to do that. right? Build a network of individuals that you have of resources. And as we continue to refine home bases, they're having to go and cobble those people together will be less and less because we will be giving it to them, right? And so I think we're making advancements to provide that support. Before our students that have been impacted, they need to know the resources that they have on the front end before they register. Right? They need to know that they have an opportunity to choose what feels manageable in their lives. And then we need to cultivate a plan to continue to check in with them and continue to make sure that they stay on that pathway, whether it's a part-time pathway, full-time pathway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Our goal is success and students change their outcomes. The clock is less of our concern. The resources and their ability to not put a ceiling over their own head is our major focal point.
Wow, that is so exciting. I really appreciate that advice and letting us know that, you know, it does take a village, right? It takes a village to bring that support, and we need to be proactive in what we provide students, right? Instead of them having to seek it out, especially the complications of college enough, right? And also considering the lived experience outside of college, right? So before we wrap this up, though, I also would like to mention, I heard a little secret here that you like to dance. And so I'm thinking we can dance outside of this meeting here. I'm gonna play a song for us. Computer audio, here we go, share. And
dancing is good for the soul.
Dance.
Let me say, as you turn this music on and we begin to get our groove on, let me ask you a question.
Yes, please.
Have you all ever been anywhere where you see somebody dancing and they look angry?
No.
Right?
I was like,
It's
no.
really difficult to be mad and angry and evil when you're dancing it out, right? So whenever you're feeling that heavy mode, the world is against you, that hill is too high to climb, all you gotta do is put on some jams and dance it out. It automatically changes your mood. Right. It also changes the mood of those that you are around.
Yes.
Right? So wherever you get an opportunity, you gotta jam this thing on out. During meetings, during advisement appointments, after a class session, change the world with dance and music. That's what I like. Thanks for putting on this bet.
Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate you here. Can't thank you enough. Take care. I'll talk soon.
Thank you for your leadership.
So how is that for you?
What an amazing experience. I'll say that. The nuggets that she gave us, the amount of information, the openness, man, and dancing out felt so good. Like the rest of my day was on like cloud 9, man.
Me too.
How about you? How was that for you?
Yeah. You know, I went into that interview thinking, you know, we'll get some standard presidential answers. You know, a few minutes each. And Melanie was just so forthcoming, and just so full of, and I think the big part of it for me was the positivity, right? About future outlook and all that stuff. You know, like you were saying, I just left that feeling energized and on board, and really looking forward to you know, to where we go next.
Totally.
Right.
And I can't even imagine. I mean, I am imagining, but I just can't foresee how being on ground is going to be such a different experience with the home bases being central, being able to actually be with students in person and help them with immediately, right? Putting on workshops differently. You know, it's just going to be a whole different experience.
Right. I mean, definitely, if I had one thing I was really looking forward to, you know, in this upcoming year, it's being back on campus. You know, we're gonna maintain an online presence, and as the president said, we figured out a lot of ways to serve students online in a way that's just better for students and more efficient for us, and we're gonna keep that. But you know, especially in the areas I serve, manufacturing, construction, transportation, I'm working with a lot of students who are working during the day and taking classes. They're improving their job skills. They're seeking new job skills. But they're online doing their classes just like they're on campus doing their classes, as much as they have to.
Yeah.
And no more, because they're living their lives, and they're taking care of their families, and they're doing what they need to do. And so just the opportunity to be on campus and be a presence for them when they're there, meet them where they're at,
Mm-hmm.
and have an opportunity to catch and interact with some students that I just haven't had an opportunity to do online. That's what's got me kind of really motivated about this upcoming year. What about you? What are you looking forward to here in this next year?
Yeah, and I think I definitely can relate to being able to connect with students on that level, and working with students. And for me, and I think we kind of touched on this a little bit beforehand about that aha moment when students kind of get the help they like, or the help that they need. And but for me, being the arts home-based coach, there's a lot of creativity, right? And part of being a creative individual is needing inspiration as well as the tools to create what it is their medium. And I'm really looking forward to getting guest speakers on campus, musicians, artists, do a lot of workshops with these students to engage with them in their medium of choice, right? And just celebrate their education, and hopefully gain nuggets from people in the industry, right? So I'm really excited. I'm really excited about that collaborativeness and those workshops that going to be held.
For sure. One more thing to be looking forward to
Tell me.
is the next podcast.
Oh yeah,
And more of these podcasts, and actually an opportunity to meet other home-based coaches.
yes,
That's
yes.
gonna be fun. Have some different voices on here, learn more
Mhm.
about what's going on with home bases and the ARC community at large. So definitely looking forward to that. Can't tell you when that's going to happen next.
But
Hopefully
soon.
sooner than later. Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully also having these podcasts in person, right? Being
Oh,
able to do that on campus.
that would be huge.
And I think that would be amazing. And also talking with you listener, hopefully, if you're a classified individual, a student, or a faculty member, or an admin, and talking with you about your work, ARC, as well as your personal life, and what inspires you, what drives you, and have a whole podcast around that as well.
For sure. This has been a lot of fun, Caesar.
Thank you, Shane. Appreciate you. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.